All right. Happy holidays to you. This is John Shen with the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. And it's freezing here in Seattle, Washington. We actually got a freezing fog alert coming up. So that's one of the things here. But of course, this is not really where we're at. By the way, if you're watching here on any one of our social media channels, please do us a favor. Subscribe, hit the reminder button, share, like, and comment. We'll look for your comments and might even shout you out during this live broadcast. All right. Well, meanwhile, back to this. I'm so excited. I met this gentleman through my good friend Joe Welch. All right, and if you know Joe, she's an amazing person, a recent author, also one of our producers. He's the president of Fusion Marketing, and he's also been with the Marines, right? So thank you so much for your service. And most importantly, he's doing some amazing remote producing. Let's bring in the one and only Jim Fuhs. Hey, Jim, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, John. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's exciting to see what you're doing. You know, we don't always realize in this virtual world, there's lots of us out there. I think I think you probably would agree. It's more about collaboration versus competition because we can all just make each other better. There's lots of people that need our help, and so great to be here.
Thank you so much, Jim. You know, that is my core belief here, too. There is so much bad Zoom out there that there should be more of us. So I have no problem, right, finding, somebody else who is an advocate for what we're trying to do. And, of course, trying to share with the world what is the quote unquote right or better way to do that. So speaking of which, Jim, let's do us a favor. For my friends who don't know you, take a moment to introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Jim Fuhs. I'm a president of Fusion Marketing, live in Marietta, Georgia, and I'm a retired Marine lieutenant colonel. And as I like to say, my tagline as I do marketing the Marine Corps way, I'm a co-host a live show / podcast on Amazon called Dealcasters. We focus on tech and how you can get better with your presentations, things of that. Do remote live stream production as well. Done it for quite a few companies, and that's been with Zoom. It's been with StreamYard, Ecamm as well. And just like to help people get better.
How'd you fall into the remote or the virtual market? Were you here before our good friend, the pandemic, or were you doing some things beforehand? Of course, a little bit of my history, we were experimenting in virtual team building over 37 years ago. Except that, nobody would buy it back then, Jim. We would tell them, you can save all this money, you can save all the time, you can still do meaningful work. And everyone's like, nah, you got to fly, John, right? So
Right.
I'm just curious, when did you start to get into this virtual and digital world?
Yeah, so I started I guess you could say in the live streaming world in 2018 after attending Social Media Marketing World. And at that time, the big focus was Facebook Live. And because at the time I was doing more social media management for clients, it's like, I'm a kind of that believer, you may be as well, John, is if you want to, be able to prove it to people, you got to be able to do it yourself, right? Because sometimes that's where we say like, hey, these professors teach stuff, but they've never done it. So I started a show called The Tim and Jim Show with my friend Tim Sohn, and we just finished about a 5-year run back in August and, retired the show for now. But so we were live streaming every week. And so then, of course, when, the pandemic started, we all of a sudden had people say, hey, we really need to have a show. Can you help us? And so since we kind of produced our own show to begin with, it was really an easy transition. And then just focusing on that and getting clients through that, I ended up being a part of the beta program that StreamYard had for producers. So I'm buried somewhere in their website, and I actually get leads sometimes where people are like, hey, I saw you on the StreamYard website. Can you help us? And so that's led to some great opportunities. San Francisco Chronicle, MIT, IBM Research. I've done some stuff with StreamYard themselves, as well as some companies that I can't necessarily talk about because of NDAs, but using Zoom as an example as well. And so I like to be platform agnostic, because I think it's really about what does the client ultimately want.
Yes.
And sometimes you can offer them solutions, and there's a lot of things I'm sure you run into, John, that they don't even think about when they're doing these things.
Oh, maybe we should spend a little time with that. First, I want to give a shout out to Phil Mershon, right? So Phil Mershon and Jim have known each other for a while. Again, Phil was one of my presenters last year. The agnostic part, I do want to talk about this for just a minute because over the time, right, I actually moved to Zoom in 2015, right, from, our good friend Skype, right? I was ex-Microsofty.
Is
And
that still a
so
thing?
I had experience with it. And so one of the parts is that a lot of the tools are dependent on Zoom. And so becoming agnostic is that I've learned how to bring many of the things that we're doing here, right, before you get to Zoom. And that way I can have the same types of experiences on any platform. It doesn't matter as long as it recognizes a camera. So therefore it's Teams, right? Any of the other WebEx, all these other platforms we're talking about. So there is something important to that agnostic part because it is so easy to lean on one platform and one feature, and then all of a sudden you get to another platform and you're lost. You're like, I don't know how to do that. So why is agnostic so important to you, Jim?
Well, one, as an example, we talked before the show. I'm a Mac guy, you're a PC guy. Some of the programs I use may not work on a PC and vice versa. So it's kind of, you got to have that flexibility because you may run into a situation where the clients don't have the hardware. And so you've got to find something that can work with the hardware that they're using, or, they may not be willing to make that investment. Everything from, the type of cameras they're using, they want to do certain things and some platforms won't allow it to be done easily.
Yeah.
I've been learning about things like, these programs with the QR code where the speaker speaks and you got somebody else actually advancing the slide based on them tapping it. So they don't even have to then deal with the issue, of like, what a lot of people don't know, right? John, I know you do because you showed me your 1,000 monitors in your office there. You can't watch a PowerPoint presentation and see yourself if you've only got one monitor.
Yeah.
And so people are like, what do you mean I need two monitors, right? I just want to use my laptop and I just want to talk into my built-in microphone on my laptop with no headphones. And, that like becomes the first thing of wait, time out. Let's at least get some, headphones so we don't get feedback. And these are those little things that people don't think about. So all the platforms, to your point, will do the same thing. But even, just like you did, I use a tool called a Stream Deck, and so it allows me, right, and using Ecamm as a virtual camera, I can show you my overhead shot, and you can still see me. And people are like, how'd you do that? It's a virtual camera, right?
Yeah.
You can do that with the technology, and it's really not that hard. I mean, that overhead camera is an iPhone, right? I didn't go out and spend thousands of dollars on another camera. It's like just use what you got, and you can look a lot better just using that and with other things. So I think that's the big thing is, because if all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I want this. The client wants this. You say, well, if you want this, then this is what we have to do to give you that, because what you want to use doesn't always have that capability.
And let's go back to that iPhone, right? You're saying, I'm another $1,000 for it. But I can tell you, like, if you buy an iPhone 7 or something, you can buy an iPhone 7 now for about $100. But it is a $1,000 camera that's inside of there. And that's why it will look so good. I did run an iPhone as a camera prior to DSLR. Like, again, I incremented my way to lots of different things. And an iPhone was surprisingly a really, really good choice for a camera that, again, if you have an old iPhone that is not being used, like you upgraded but somehow or another didn't sell your other one, those are some things that you can look and saying, how can I repurpose my old stuff? I'm going to take a different track than I normally would, Jim, right? Normally I ask, what would you do that for a virtual meeting be engaging? But I actually want to go to the other side. I would like to talk about some disasters and like, what are some basic things, but we keep still seeing, it's 2023, right? And we're still seeing them here. I'll start with an easy one, Jim. Camera angle. Right,
Yes.
right now, both Jim and I have taken a lot of effort to make sure our camera is exactly at eye level when we're doing it. And when we do a few things, like we might look around, but if we're going to talk to each other, I'm trained to make sure and make a key point like right here. And there's still so many people, high, low, up the nose, right? So I'm seeing the ceiling. What else, and there's so many things that are like that where I think a camera angle can solve a good portion of your, image issues that you have online. Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's about framing yourself, right? Like you said, put yourself in the middle third, almost, don't cut your head off. We see that a lot too, right? People will lean in and all of a sudden you don't see the top of their head. Yeah,
Right.
there you go.
Not a good look.
No, no, it's not. And they don't think about those things. And then even with the nice thing about, as an example, using the iPhone,
Yeah.
I use an app called Camo that
Yeah.
you can buy, like a lifetime license, I think is $79,
Yeah.
and it'll work on up to 2 of your computers. Well, you hardwire it, which is another important thing to do, to your computer so the battery doesn't die while you're on.
I've had that
And
happen too. Yes.
it will actually let you use your back, you know, if you want to call it cameras, because it allows you to zoom in and out through your desktop, as opposed to like, oh, I gotta, like right now, if I wanted to adjust this overhead camera, I don't have to like mess with the phone. It can just stay there.
Yeah.
So now you can put that phone on a tripod, get that angle like you're talking about, and nobody sees it. So I think, that I even think I've gotten to the point where I feel like you're better off using an iPhone or, Galaxy, oh, whatever, an old smartphone camera
Right.
is better than going out and buying a webcam.
Yeah. And it's like the same or less price, but the quality, again, you do have to buy a smaller app for it. Like I think in OBS, there's an OBS version for the iPhone app. But the best part is if you pay for it once, like I've installed it on like 6 or 7 phones.
Right.
It's a small investment to really turn something and get something great. I think get something
Yeah.
great that doesn't have to cost a lot. Otherwise, you got to go to the DSLR, which the starting range is like $500-$600.
Yes.
And that's like 6 times the range. Now, it's worth it in some cases, but but not everyone else has, that kind of budget. So I think those are key.
Right.
All right, what are some of your other disengaging pet peeves with like virtual, disasters that you see on a repeated basis especially over the last 3 years?
Well, a lot of it is, I guess we'll call it the echo cancellation problem, where people are not wearing headphones, or if you don't want to have the can look, go to in-ear monitors, right? These, you can't really tell unless I turn my head that I have these in-ear monitors. I'm not using, and you're not either, John, I am not using the AirPods, right?
Right.
I am actually hardwired into my computer with a wire that's behind me, not in front of me, so it doesn't start making noise by the microphone. That's the other thing. People will use their wired, Apple headphones, and then you start hearing this. It's like, what's that noise? It's because it's going against your shirt.
Yes.
And then if they're not wearing headphones and they're listening to you through their computer speakers, what happens is, and now I'm using a dynamic microphone, so I have to be right next to it for you to hear me.
Yes.
But they'll have some of these other microphones, and I'm going to say it because it's no longer going to be made, the Blue Yeti, right?
Yeah.
The Blue Yeti picks up everything. So now all of a sudden, that audio that they're listening to, right? I'm listening to John's voice, is going into my microphone, and now we're hearing that echo of John's voice twice, and everybody's like, it's driving you crazy. So headphones, simple thing to at least stop that. And then, ultimately you want to get a good microphone because, John, I think you would agree, I'll forgive bad video, but I will not forgive bad audio. That will
I have another
drive
friend,
people
right?
away like
Yeah.
in 5 seconds.
Another friend who says that it's just like your audio accounts for 75% or more of your keynote performance. And so if you don't have the right mic, if people are straining to hear you, here are all the words that I use too. Tinny, right? Tinny is like way too much high frequency, echoey, right? So like you're in a room, it feels like you're in a bathroom is also, I think, one of my top descriptors. That makes it sound, and you can usually tell. What's amazing too, so, Jim, is often now I've tuned my ears to the part where I can even see somebody. Let's say they have that amazing Blue Yeti mic, right? And it still sounds like a shower, and I'm like, "Hey, do me a favor, just lean into your mic." And they're like, "Hello," and it doesn't change,
Right.
And it's like they have all the equipment, but there is still one setting, and they haven't tested it, and it's not working for them right now. They still have the same old audio, and they have no idea. Nobody, right? And it's not necessarily their fault. There's a lot of non-indicators that you get. Like you don't hear yourself back in Zoom.
Right.
And
Right.
so without that feedback, you have no idea that you just sound like you're in a shower.
Yes.
So
Well,
I agree.
and then the other thing you see too is sometimes, let's say they're, they're part of a Zoom meeting presentation. They've got the light behind them, right?
Oh,
And so
oh,
then
oh.
it's like you're seeing shadows. It looks like they're in the witness protection program. And it's like, even if they just did a 180, they would look better, right? But then like, oh, well, that means I would have to move my desk. It's been, what, 3+ years, John? Can't people find a place that they can do video yet? I mean, what are they waiting for?
Oh, Jim, you gotta watch my social media, right? If you watch my Facebook, I'll post these ridiculous setups that I have in like Airbnbs and hotels. One of my favorite is I didn't bring lighting, so you take the lampshade off the light and just stick it behind the computer,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you're lit up again, right? And it's
Right.
like, what was my favorite? Oh, pull a drawer. So there was a drawer in the hotel that I needed to turn upside down that became a monitor stand for me so I could stand up and have the camera at eye level.
Nice.
These are things that it takes just a little bit of effort, but it will pay you back, right? Because it's just, I don't think there's any excuse. Anytime that you're online, and even if you're a guest, only if you're the attendee, unless you're going to have your camera off, which I also don't recommend. I mean, take the energy and the effort to show up and just
Definitely.
really, really show up. So I totally agree with that one. Um, I even carry a mic with me now when I travel, and it's amazing. I tried 2 or 3 other mics, and there's one that iRig HD2. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a USB mic, and when you use it right, it's nobody. I've had people come and tell me, going, "You're the best sounding person on here, and you're only the producer, right? You're not even a presenter. What mic is that?"
Right. Right. I have that happen too as well sometimes. They're like, oh, I really like your setup. It's like, well, this is my studio. It's, and just like you have your studio, make it
Oh,
easy to just go online, right? It shouldn't be this big thing that every time you're going to go live, whether on the camera or
right.
behind the scenes, that you got to like scramble, right? So create that dedicated space, or make it easy to, like, if you've got to use that, you've got one computer, say, for example,
Right.
just unplug the stuff you don't need to, leave it in place and take that computer with you. But then you can just plug the computer in, remember to reboot it, and then, you get started.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits I feel like that I've had over the pandemic is that because I used to travel so much, so then you can't really set anything up, but really invested in the home setup, and it paid me back, right, in droves because one, everything works, right? There are a lot of different connections. The more and more complicated your setup gets, the more stuff that you have. But the more that you work with it every day, the more you can rely on it. And more importantly, you got to train yourself to use it, right? So to have music or any of these other smaller things around here, unless you have a full-time producer with you, sometimes you got to figure out how to do the majority of it yourself. And I think those are some of the other things that I found benefits over the years. Jim, what are some of your production disasters that you've had over the years? Like one of my favorites to tell about is we had a woman who was presenting a 3-hour certification class where people paid extra, for this virtual for her to teach this class so they could get some kind of designation. 2.5 hours in the class, she freezes and then poof, she disappears. Right.
That's
So
probably
as a
that's probably the
producer,
one you see the most, is when the person drops off in the middle of things, and it's kind of like there was no plan B, or there was no, they didn't even say, hey, we need a slide to like say, hey, we'll be back in a bit, because maybe they were doing it themselves. I think the other one, a lot of times it's the microphone setup, or maybe they're using Bluetooth, and that goes, because that's the one thing. The other thing I've learned, because it happened to me, what wasn't necessarily a complete disaster,
yeah.
but I was the producer and on a show me and my friend Tim were doing. It was like our New Year's show, and we had a bunch of guests on. Well, we had a really quick power surge in my house where the power went out, like just like that. But guess what? Everything on my end rebooted, and I was producing the show. So they were stuck in a certain look until I could get back up. So what did I end up doing? I went out and have bought the UPSs, and they're all over my house. So at a minimum, I will, have a few minutes to know if my power goes out that, okay, I can still, my internet's even hooked into that, my router. So the internet will keep going until, and then, being hardwired is a lot better too than being on Wi-Fi, because you don't know when the Wi-Fi may do something weird, or all of a sudden, if you've got other people in your location, they're decided they wanted to do something, and it starts to, affect your bandwidth. So you'll see that, right? The freezes that'll happen because they don't have enough internet. The power, right? That can not always be your friend, because like you said, even right now, we both are experiencing cold weather. Well, who's to say that you don't all of a sudden have a power line snap because it got too cold and froze something?
Yes, no. Yeah, I finally bought an uninterrupted power supply. This is the number of reboots it saved me already in the last year.
Nice.
So I keep a tally, right? Every time like the power flickers, but I don't reboot, I keep track of that. And then again, you can sometimes, we lost power for 8 hours recently. Luckily, I had no programs that day, but the UPS will let me run like a laptop for probably 5 or 6 hours. I can't run this big system; it draws
Right.
too much power. But one of my backups is then to go back to that. The cell phone will actually do that, because then the cell phone can actually be your backup network. I actually bought a new backup. One of the 5G internets that's using
Hmm.
either Verizon and T-Mobile both have them as a home internet, and it has a battery in it. So
Oh,
that will actually run as long as the cell signal towers are still running. The power, and that thing has a battery for like 3 or 4 hours. I have a backup internet now that I can run for 3 or 4 hours, and it'll run like 300, 400 megabits per second, which is enough to keep a Zoom and a stream alive. So
right, right.
yeah,
Yeah. So those are definitely some of the challenges. And then the other thing I've seen is where people are attempting to do hybrid meetings.
yes,
I've seen that a lot with, especially like with Toastmasters groups, where they don't understand that, okay, you've got to engage the audience. I know that's part of what you talk about. You got to engage those people that are watching or part of the meeting on Zoom. So it can't be just about the people in the room, right? So you've got to have multiple mics, make sure that the people that are maybe watching through the Zoom can hear you. But at the same time, you can't have everybody on their laptop because they want to chat with the people on Zoom, because now you start getting those echoes going.
yeah.
So I think that those are the sort of things you have to consider, or it makes it a bad experience for people, and then they're not going to want to do it again.
What is some of your best hybrid tips now, right? Again, I've been running hybrid. A lot of, even some pretty advanced people have shied away from it, saying it's either too expensive or too complicated. But I think pushing this format in hybrid and learning how to be engaging in hybrid, we're just gonna have to learn how to do it, because it's got so many advantages. And what I tell people is you get the energy of in person and the reach of virtual, and you can actually do it at the same time. I think you could do some phenomenal stuff if you have the right practices. What are some of your top practices, Jim, that you would recommend to clients?
Well, I definitely like Zoom when it comes to running hybrid, because it does allow you, one, right? You might have to have multiple accounts if you want to have maybe multiple cameras going at once in the location you're at, but it allows you to bring people from all over in, right? And you're
Yes.
not limited, which is sometimes a problem with some of these other live streaming platforms, is that you can only have so many people,
Yes.
right? With a Zoom, if it's a Zoom meeting, right, you can go to, however many people you want to put on Hollywood Squares, but you can also, even with a webinar, which I didn't realize this till a few months ago. I thought this was a really neat feature, is if I'm in the webinar audience,
Yes.
right, you can allow me to raise my hand, and you can actually just bring me on with my audio, right? So now I don't have to
Yes.
worry about you being camera ready, and you can ask that question and everybody can hear it, right? So part of it is having that speaker set up so that you can do that. I think wireless mics work really good.
Yes.
I've been using the Rode Wireless Go 2. Now, what I like about it, and I don't know if you've done this, John, is they have this, what we call like this fake microphone looking thing, where you slide the transmitters and you put a pop filter over it. Well, now you
Oh
can
yeah,
just
yeah,
hand it
yeah,
to people.
yeah,
So
yeah,
then
yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have to worry about like, oh, I need the clip and I need the lav. You just use those. So you have one with the speaker, and then you have someone hand it to the people in the room that are talking, so that everybody that's not physically there can hear what's going on. And of course, it also, the Rode records the audio, saves that audio for you, so you can repurpose that as well if you need to do stuff with that
Well,
later.
it'll record locally, like into a separate SD card.
Yes.
So in case something broke on the other connection, you'll still get. Oh, I didn't know that. That's a cool
Yes.
part.
Yeah.
I've been looking at those roads. It's definitely I recommend it to people who need a wireless mic. Get two of them, right? So you can actually swap out the batteries in the worst case scenario. I do a combination now. So I'm using these Sennheiser EW100s
hmm
and as the headset mic, and then the handhelds. I now have two Shure mics. I also used a less expensive brand, but in some locations, the frequencies would get interrupted by something else. Like in one building I have in Seattle, I don't know, they must have be running a lot of wireless equipment because it just doesn't work there. But
Mm.
these other microphones work. The key that we gave in our guidance, like we do a small speaker training for this hybrid conference, and we just have to tell the speakers either repeat something that somebody said or wait for a mic. And if you could just do that for the benefit of both the recording and the virtual audience, now the virtual audience will be included because there's nothing worse than the virtual audience starts talking and you're on virtual and you're like, I can't hear this person. And then they
hmm
start answering the question. You're like, I have no context for what this
Right.
question is. I'm
Right.
now just completely lost, right?
Well, and even if you were, say, multi-streaming, right, like you're doing today, what people don't always realize is, and that's part of the reason of, as an example, you might say, well, hey, Phil over on YouTube is asking this because I might be watching on Facebook. So it
Yes.
kind of goes back to context. I'm not seeing that chat. I'm not seeing what's going on the other platform. So, I think that ties in nicely with what you're saying about hybrid is like repeat the question so
Yes.
everybody knows what was said or asked. And then that way, even for repurposing, right? Now you have that ability to have that as part of the repurpose because otherwise it might get lost in the translation.
One of the other tips that we found, Jim, and I'd be curious of your opinion on it, virtual MCs for a hybrid, right? It's just that there's an MC, even if you have an in-person MC, in getting a virtual MC, we've seen only 20% of the programs use it, but the ones that they do, one, you can solve technical problems. Let's say you disconnect from the actual in-person, a virtual MC will step in and like take care of the virtual audience, communicate. That's the other part as an attendee. If you just communicate with me, I'll be okay, right? Knowing at least it's not my fault, it's not my connection, something's happening, and keep me updated with what's going on. And again, that virtual MC can also then add to the program and really take care of that virtual audience. So that's something I've seen. I don't know if you've seen use of virtual MCs in your programs, Jim.
I haven't, but I really like that idea. I think that makes a lot of sense because, right, if they and maybe you're using something like Unity or something where that
Yes.
virtual MC can communicate with the in-person production team, and so because you may not realize that something is not working right, or you may not realize that somebody's had maybe one of the people that's speaking is virtual and they've had a disconnection and say, hey, so and so's had this, but we're getting it fixed. But it gives you the chance to adjust the program. So I think that's a great idea to have a virtual MC. I mean, I think, and I don't know how you feel, John, right now. One, this isn't going to go away. I think some companies are
Right.
going to want to continue to do, at a minimum, virtual, if not hybrid,
Hmm.
because it's giving people access that wouldn't otherwise participate.
Yep.
I mean, I was just at an in-person conference a couple weeks ago, and it was great. But there probably were people that's like, I just can't afford to go. I don't want to pay for the hotel. So I think I can see both sides. Oh, we want the in-person, we want to do the fist bumping and everything else. But there's also, we also save ourselves a lot of time if we know, like, hey, just like what you did with your conference was great. It's like, I can get up, I can get my cup of coffee, I can get some great education, and then I can just go back to, what I need to do, or I can even watch the replay
Yeah.
because, hey, that was a really good session. I need to go back and watch it again. But when you're in person, sometimes it's almost overwhelming, right? Or, oh, which session am I going to go to,
Right. If you have
right?
multiple breakouts, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the best examples I have is GSM Con or Government Social Media Conference, where they have a hybrid structure and they get a great attendance. Like it was last year was 950 in person, 650 virtual. And almost all the virtual attendees said, you know, we're on a government budget, all right, and there a lot of the things are getting cut or whatever going on, and just saying without the virtual option they couldn't attend. But they're
Hmm.
getting the same number, credit or clock hours or whatever else they need to, educational units, and more importantly, they're able to do their work better because the social media too is evolving so fast every year. So I think that's a great example with that. All right,
Yeah.
speaking of examples, and Jim, what do you see into the future? So now you've used all this equipment every day. You've seen some stuff. You're like, you are producing things that are in other locations, right? With either robotic cameras or things that you can do. What do you think the future is of virtual and hybrid, say 10 or more years from now?
Wow, that's one. It's going to probably be crazy. I could see where it's going to be more immersive. Like I've I haven't necessarily produced one yet, but I have a good friend, and you may know him, Mitch Jackson.
Hmm.
He's called the Streaming Lawyer. He's doing a lot with virtual reality, AI. I mean, we could actually stream this into an Oculus Quest if we wanted to play around with it. This what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see more of that sort of thing with virtual reality, augmented reality. And I think with these new, you've got the Quest 3 out now. You've also got Apple getting ready to release their product early next year, which looks really exciting, but it's also got a big price tag. So I think there's going to be more of that when it comes to hybrid and virtual. I think I'm a big fan of what I call scene-based software. And so what that means, just like this, right? In a sense, this is a scene. I'm switching to a different look to allow me to do something else. You can use things like PowerPoint, Keynote, just like you're doing, to allow us to see different things, to still be a part of the conversation, right? I think we don't want to see people just share their PowerPoint deck, right? And then disappear from the screen. We want to, it's like when you're a speaker, people are there to see you speak. And so sometimes if you just start, you know, putting up your slides and are basically reading your slides, you lose that engagement. And I think that's one of those things where I think as people get more comfortable with understanding how to, in a sense, design that, it will become more interactive. I know you've been working with a lot of different products. You've got what Kahoot and some of these other things that allow you to gamify things. I think we're going to see more of that. I think that's going to get better and more affordable for folks as well to make as a part of their uh, their their shows.
Yeah, I think that because right now a lot of presenters are still side by side, and that I still advocating you got to get inside,
Hmm.
your material, and so things like this when you can start
Yes.
clocking through a presentation and actually refer to things right that don't actually exist, but they exist in your virtual world. I think
Yes.
that's. I'm surprised now, but I'm convinced after going to the presentation summit, another conference I go to, is that. Still a lot of presenters are not looking about how to do that, and so there's still a lot of work you can do to really present in a new way. In fact, I'm rewriting a new program um, for the topic of engaging, right? How to be more
Hmm.
engaging, Jim. And I'm going to use a combination of engagement techniques that are uh, just verbal, right? They require no tech, and add it on with a technology, right? And just run the whole piece. And I'm just excited to showcase new things like that because I just don't think a lot of people are doing it. I don't think a lot of people
Right. Well,
are doing
and I
it.
think too, my friend Chris Stone and I, we talk about, and Chris really made me aware of it. It's like it's called pattern interrupt, right? You got to
Yes.
do some things to keep people's attention. So whether it's like you just did, where you're changing the background, right, or even vocal variety, right? Don't be monotone, right? Get excited. You got to remember, you maybe have done this talk 20 times, but it's the first time somebody's seen you, and that can become a real danger that you get that know that material's so good you forget to bring the energy, and that can be a definite problem.
Yes. So what my other friend loves to say, right? You are the presentation in the end. They didn't pay to come see slides. They paid to come see you, Jim.
Right. Right.
And so do your part. I mean, again, as National Speaker Association members and ex-members, we care about the craft. of communicating and speaking. We're still humans. It's the thing that we love to do. And whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in person, that's the thing I'm on right now, is that engaging is still a key topic for all three platforms. You know, that's the funny part. I thought I went back to in-person conferences and I thought people would be like immediately so excited to be engaging, and they went back to their old formats. All right. Oh, it's so crazy. They were like, talk for 45 minutes, take 15 minutes of Q&A. Don't let the audience say anything for 45 minutes. I'm like, oh, we learned nothing in 3 years, right? Where's the hugs? Where's the high five? Where, you know, now that you can do this here and you're not even taking advantage of that. Jim, do me a favor. If people could only remember one thing from this interview with you, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Good audio is more important than good video.
I so agree. There are so many people who, that's like probably one of my first coaching advice is like, I want to help you. Let me help you get a mic, right? For less than $50, you can
Yes.
get into the realm of sounding, you know, like you are. And if you're a professional speaker and you can't spend $50, all right, it's just saying something about you and your craft, and it's amazing. All right, so do that. Again, if you spend a lot of time meeting online, even if you are not a paid speaker, but you're in a paid job and you meet with people remote all the time, it will represent you. It will represent you better if you can get the right mic. Jim, thank you so much for your sage advice. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, they can find me at fusionmarketing.live, or just go to LinkedIn and connect or follow me at Jim Fuhs. You know, that's probably my favorite platform right now is LinkedIn. I think at least you see when people do stuff. You don't see it sometimes on the other ones.
Well, thank you, Jim. I look forward to staying connected with you and seeing some other cool new innovations that you have for 2024.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again. All right. You've been listening here to Jim Fuhs, right, from Fusion Marketing. His number one piece of advice, it's your maybe it's your holiday list. Go get a mic. Get a mic and learn how to use it. You know, things like that, right? Vary your vocal tone during a meeting or during a presentation too. Go fast, go slow. You know, these are things that you can do with whatever mic you have, and just find the way for you to sound great on a mic. Speaking of sounding great, I hope that we sounded great here. Subscribe, share, like, or comment. We'd love to hear from you. If you want all the episodes, we now have a podcast here available on 13 different platforms. Go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online and subscribe. We have a new episode releasing every single Wednesday. We already have episodes queued up into 2024. And if you want to learn that more, come to the Engaging Conference. This is going to be the first year that's hybrid. I can't wait for Jim to see it, hopefully live, but maybe in virtual. Just go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/CON. There's a free ticket for YouTube. There's a paid ticket for the VIP and Zoom. And look for this new live ticket where we're going to have about 100 to 150 people here in Seattle with our live audience. And we want to show you how hybrid can be better, it can be amazing, and can be engaging. And speaking of being engaging, if you want to be the next person to be interviewed here on the Engaging Virtual Meeting podcast, go to this website, engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, select interview, and you could be the next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. I just want to thank Jim Fuhs, and we hope to see you next time. Happy holidays to all of you, and I'll see you next time.
Always